Right, thanks for joining me once again. Live reaction, off the cuff, no rehearsal, haven't watched this through. What have we got here? We have got Dr. Ken Berry versus Joel Kahn, vegan imbecile, hosted.
We've always eaten lots of meat, and we can tell that very clearly, and we're basically effectively super carnivores.
The idea that we've been eating lots of meat for a long time is, I think, very much academically up in play.
No, it isn't. It's an established fact, Joel.
Just gotta read the most.
All you need to do is go to the stable isotope testing. This is absolutely above reproach and question. We know this for a fact, Joel. Get over it.
The most recent literature and not just go with hearsay.
All of those.
It's not hearsay, Joel. Stable isotope testing is actual science.
Those tools that you hear about, Stone Age tools, those were not tools. Without exception, they were weapons. They were used to hunt animals and cut them up so we could eat them.
I prefer lower saturated fat diets
Who cares, Joel? You're an imbecile.
in my heart clinic patients because I think the literature overwhelmingly supports that.
Well, that shows your destitution of comprehension of the literature, Joel. It does not support that, not one jot. Not at all.
There's Dr. Ansel Keys in a nutshell.
Dr. Ansel Keys was a criminal and a misanthropist.
Is he the greatest scientist in the world?
Absolutely not. Criminal misanthropist is what he was.
I don't know, but is he the devil? He's definitely not the devil.
Well, no, Joel, because that's you, son.
So would it be safe to say that a huge reason that you believe that high saturated fat is harmful to human for, let's just say, all-cause mortality and other things too, is due to the research done by Ansel Keys? Would you credit a lot of that? Okay, so I personally find that a lot of the disagreements between, let's say, a carnivore or an animal-based or meat-based community, or people who subscribe to that lifestyle, I should say, versus people who do not, let's say vegan or plant-based, I find that it's almost impossible to move forward without coming to an agreement on the kind of research that's been done.
Right, well, there is no research whatsoever available extant in the literature anywhere that can inform on cause nor effect as that relates to any hard health outcome in human beings over any period of time as that relates to any nutritional practice, whatever. Those are the facts. That is why this discussion continues, Lauren. That is why this debate continues, because we don't have the answer in science. If we did, there'd be nothing to discuss any further, would there?
And the foundation of our knowledge. So, Dr. Kahn, a lot of people in the carnivore or the meat-based lifestyle realm really fundamentally believe that Ansel Keys did a terrible thing with him.
And he did, absolutely. There's no two ways about that. It's an established fact. He cherry-picked his data set. That is academic misconduct of the highest order. He did that in order to get a publication and to make a name for himself. Nothing to do with public health, whatever.
His study and lied about data that is not only just not good to lie, but it has created an entire ripple effect in terms of our medicine and how we understand medicine. So that's been a huge factor that I think without understanding those two, that one area and getting on the same page with it, it's hard to move forward. So I know that you've had a history, Dr. Kahn, with studying Ansel Keys. Would you mind sharing what you've done with his research and then your standpoint on that? And then I'd love to hear the same from you, Dr. Berry.
Sure. When I was in medical school, which is over 40 years ago, I never heard the name, Ansel Keys. But I got interested just out of a natural curiosity, and I got a feeling Dr. Berry is naturally curious. Who was this man that his name pops up, fairly frequently, certainly in the world of cholesterol and dietary saturated fat and future health guidelines, and predominantly the Mediterranean diet. So totally voluntarily, I read almost all 300 of his peer-reviewed published papers.
So how is it then, Joel, that you have such a destitution of comprehension of the quality or lack thereof of that work in terms of its ability to inform us on cause or effect? How is that possible, other than you are actually not a scientist, neither are you a scientist's backside, son. You're a physician who is vastly out of his lane, perhaps.
And a very long, really a book called The 7 Countries Study, published in 1970. And it's always important to stress, Dr. Ansel Keys never worked alone. He had 18
No criminal, evil, misanthropic folks tend to work alone, Joel. There always tends to be a criminal cabal in the background. It's true today as well.
Researchers who, in their own right, all over the world, are Some are still alive because we're talking about research done in the late 50s, 60s, 70s, with a few publications still coming out. But Dr. Keyes was always surrounded by some of the brightest epidemiologists, nutritionists, biochemists. His own wife was a biochemist, Margaret.
Okay, so a bunch of opinions.
And, the conclusion in a long nutshell was the example, pretty unknown in America, called the Mediterranean diet. Eat like you're a...
What is that, Joel? Would you like to define that for us? Because there are thousands of different peoples of different kinds living around the Mediterranean who all have quite disparate, quite different diets, in fact.
Poor Italian. Many people don't know he ended up living in Minneapolis most of his career. But every winter for 40 years, he had a big home south of Naples in a little town called Piopi. And it's a town of 300 people, but I've visited Piopi. There is a museum to the Mediterranean.
Oh, so what? Can we get to some science at any point? No. I wonder why not.
Diet on the Mediterranean Sea. There's a museum to Ansel Keys.
Oh, this is an awesome story, Joel, but it really needs more emphasis on the dragons and a better ending after 8 seasons, frankly.
His house is still there, although it's privately owned. And from around the world, people would come to Piopi, P-I-O-P-P-I. Now, there is a book written by my friend, Dr. Malhotra, Asim Malhotra, called The Piopi Diet. I don't agree with it because he's basically using this example of a little town of 300 people for the whole world. It's a bit of a stretch, but anyways, it's a
not much more of a stretch than the garbage you're going to put forward, I assume, Joel. Because it's the same garbage every time, and it's been debunked, I don't know how many thousand times already. So why we need to go over this again? Well, it's because you're a criminal, basically, Joel, and this is water off a duck's back to you. You will just ignore the absolutely unassailable refutations that have been proffered time and time again to your errant, ridiculous nonsense as if it's never occurred. That's all you've got, though, is your theology. That's why. Joel Kahn is a card-carrying priest of the Church of Anorexia Vegana, for those that don't know.
It's a bit of a famous tiny town. And he basically promoted to the United States in the 60s and 70s with 3 books that became major bestsellers. Recipes and the rationale.
There is no rationale for the avoidance of saturated fat or cholesterol in the diet, Joel. There never was, and there never will be.
By chronic diseases that he was seeing in Minneapolis already. Heart attacks, diabetes, obesity, dementia.
All of those are inflammatory.
Metabolic disorders were
No, they're inflammatory disorders.
Exceedingly rare in Italian towns, particularly Naples. And it turns out 6 other countries, which is why his major tour de force is
How many countries are there in the world, Joel? You've just said it's no good looking at the world on the basis of a town of 300 people, and then you've given us the example of 6 countries that are cherry-picked to suit a pattern in order to produce a publication. You buffoon. You absolute imbecile. There it is right there. Joel Kahn, theologist, double standard carrier.
The 7-country study. But
Joel Kahn, who lacks the set to front me face-to-face for a debate on this, among others.
He died. He was 100.5 years old. I think he died in about 2004, if my memory serves me.
Yes, 2004. And N equals 1, Joel. So what?
Won many awards.
So what?
I will say...
I've won many awards myself, Joel. Does that make me credible too? I'm credible because of what I say, in fact, not because of any awards that somebody else has given me.
So when I visited his Wikipedia 10 years ago, you would have thought you were reading the demon. He took money from industry.
He did, because that's how you get money for research, Joel. If you'd actually been involved yourself in any research, genuinely, other than just getting your name on a bunch of papers, you'd know that.
And he distorted it. And
he did that, yes, absolutely, because that's what cherry picking is, Joel.
The key argument, I want to maybe one more minute, was there is something called the 7-country studies.
You've mentioned that already, Joel, remember?
7 countries, 16 community, 12,000 men spread around the world, very different diets. Before the era of the internet and computers. And they would send a team of researchers to do EKGs, blood pressures, physical exams, interviews. They'd take their food back to Minneapolis and analyze it for its nutritional content.
Well, no, they take some food back. Was it the food that those people had eaten? No, because the food that those people had eaten had been eaten by those people. So you can't take it back anywhere, can you? All right.
And the bottom line, he identified that the best health were communities that had a plant-forward diet.
False. And even if they did, which is false, so what? Was that the only degree of freedom? You just said, not a minute ago in your own speech there, Joel, that they had many different lifestyles and diets and things. Ergo, there were many degrees of freedom not controlled. Ergo, we're not doing science here, are we? We're doing stories.
That enjoyed olive oil rather than butter, lard, or ghee. That ate a lot of fruits and vegetables and high-fiber diets.
And the Hong Kong population are the longest living population on the planet, it seems, Joel. And they have the highest consumption of meat and animal fat in the world. Oh, dear.
And he published correlations between the...
Yes, correlations which prove absolutely nothing except the relationship between X and Y, so long as you actually report what was observed instead of first adjusting it to something else, which is what they always do, i.e. fabricate the data to suit the funding source.
Percentage of saturated fat in the diet. East Finland won the award for the highest saturated fat in the diet and the most coronary heart disease.
Yeah, and the Hong Kong population are the longest living population in the world, remember, and they eat more saturated fat than those in Finland, I'm told. So there goes that.
And the highest blood cholesterol level.
So what?
As opposed to Japan and Yugoslavia that had very low-fat diets and the lowest coronary heart disease rates. And
so what? Other degrees of freedom are at play there, Joel.
Better longevity.
According to whom? On the basis of what?
And published it. But somewhere along the way, I got to tell you this and then we're done. In 1950...
Joel Kahn is never done. This is the point. It's the same inane, rambling, illogical, pustulous nonsense every time he opens his rancid, stinking gob. Every time. Same shit. That's why I can do this without rehearsing it, because I know exactly what he's going to say and how to answer it.
And nobody can take me on this. I'm his biographer.
I will take you any day of the week and 3 times on Sunday, Joel Kahn. But you lack the stones to front up for that, don't you, son? I wonder why.
Biographer. I am Dr. Ansel Keys' biographer.
I know you're not.
I never met the man. I don't know his family. I have no skin in the game. And he was no...
You do, because you're a card-carrying member, priest, in fact, of the Church of Anorexia Vegana. You do have skin in the game. You have a theology, and you have a desire to support that theology by using pseudoscience, obfuscation, misdirect, and outright lies.
Vegan. If you read his cookbooks, oh boy, is he far from a vegan. But he taught the Mediterranean diet. He taught in the cookbooks, don't add sugar, don't add sugar, don't add sugar. So
well, those 3 things are all the same thing, aren't they? And they're all correct. Don't add sugar.
Dr. Berry would like the recipes. Actually, they're closer to Dr. Berry's diet than they are to my diet. But he proposed in 1953 from a rather crappy database, FAO, it's a government nutritional database, that this relationship might be true. And he had to pick some countries to propose a hypothesis.
Right, so he picked the 7 that did follow the hypothesis so that he could publish it. That's what he did. Criminal.
And he picked 6 countries out of 22. Why?
Because he's a criminal and he needed to get it published. That's why, Joel. There's no way around this. Sorry about that.
There are no death records in Mexico, and you can't really comment on food and death if you don't have death records.
Neither can you comment on food and death if you don't lock people in labs for their entire life and track everything because of uncontrolled degrees of freedom. It's a basic scientific tenet, Joel. Fuck's sake.
As one example, 6 countries, and that set up the hypothesis that led him to do this 12-year major study, 1958 through 1970, and then 25-year follow-up from 1970 to 1995. If you would have read his Wikipedia, you would read that he,
remember how Joel was going to be finished in a minute?
Purposely left out some of these data points. The reality is that 1953 study matters not. It was a hypothesis.
That's right, and it still doesn't matter because it's still a hypothesis and it's still false. Lipids do not cause heart disease or any other disease. What's next?
He went forward like scientists should and did one of the most difficult studies, probably to this date, trying to get nutritional data. Kind of like Weston Price. He was just one guy touring the world in the 1930s. But Dr. Keys made it a very academic international program. And you can argue that when he introduced the Mediterranean diet, which wasn't a McDonald's diet, it wasn't an Arby's diet.
Oh, for God's sake, Joel, stop fucking talking. You've provided absolutely nothing as usual. The same rancid garbage again.
Was planned to be a low sugar diet and was planned to be a high olive oil diet and fruits and vegetables and grains. that he did something nefarious. But fortunately, his Wikipedia has been updated, I think a lot because I wrote his biography.
So you said already, remember?
And
you wrote a biography.
He reads like what he deserves as a guy who was doing tough science.
No, he was a criminal misanthropist who ought to have spent the remainder of his natural life in prison, Joel. Those are the facts. He cherry-picked his data. Fact.
He did do a lot of what are called metabolic ward studies. Oh,
here we go. Now Joel is going to attempt to talk about science, finally. All right, let's hear it.
Careful science, which...
No, they're not. Have you ever actually done any metabolic ward studies yourself, Joel, other than just get your name on things by being Joel Kahn? No. Do you actually have any scientific ability of your own or knowledge of your own, Joel? No, that's clear every time you open your mouth.
Neither Dr. Berry or I do.
That's right, and I have done. All right?
To take 30 people, lock them up for 4 or 8 weeks at the National Institutes of Health.
Right, and so once you've done that, Joel, over what period of time can you extrapolate your findings? 4 to 8 weeks, and no longer, not 1 day longer. Who is interested in outcomes over 4 to 8 weeks? Not me, son.
Measure every calorie in, every calorie.
No, you can't measure calories in or out. That is an impossibility. And you can't take calories in anyway, Joel, because calories are made manifest as photons. Photons have no rest mass, ergo cannot be brought to rest. All right, learn some physics, for goodness sake.
Calorie out, every respiration, every metabolic function.
Nonsense. Nobody has measured every respiration in and out in a human being over 4 to 8 weeks, Joel Kahn. Has not been done.
Do an experiment. And, there's over 395 of those metabolic studies that Dr. Keyes was one.
Over 395? So is it 396 or 7,000,002? Give us a number. God's sake.
One of the participants.
And none of them prove a damn thing over any period of time longer than what was observed. Actually observed. Not one of them. Because that's one of the first rules of science. You cannot extrapolate your study beyond its tenure.
And the correlation between dietary saturated fat and blood cholesterol, because you're not going to measure death rates in 8 weeks.
But that's right.
There's absolutely a very high correlation.
So what, over 4 to 8 weeks? Many things are correlated with many things, including drownings in swimming pools being highly correlated with the release of movies starring Nicolas Cage. Should we then ban movies starring Nicolas Cage, Joel? I think we should, personally, but not because that will have any effect on drownings in swimming pools.
Which is why I prefer lower saturated fat diets in my heart clinic patients.
Right, so you're an imbecile who does not understand one of the first basic tenets of science, that being that correlation cannot establish causality, not one jot. Right, so you're an incompetent buffoon, and you've just said it. You could have said that in 2 seconds flat. However, it's taken you nearly 10 minutes to prove absolutely that you are a mindless buffoon, Joel Kahn. Incredible. By which I mean entirely lacking in credibility. What's next?
I think the literature overwhelmingly supports that.
Well, you have no idea what the literature actually says, Joel, or how to take it as a competent scientist, because you're not one, clearly.
So there's Dr. Ansel Keys in a nutshell. Now, I don't know, but is he the devil?
Yes, and you are too. You're both the devil.
Definitely not the devil.
Yes, definitely is.
Okay.
Ansel Keys is directly responsible for more deaths than Hitler and Pol Pot put together.
Okay. So would it be safe to say that a huge reason that you believe that high saturated fat is harmful to a human for, let's just say, all cause more...
All right, so you've let him talk for more than 10 minutes without interrupting him and saying, Joel, it's time for you to stop now because you're just waffling. And now you're going to invite him to keep talking. Goodness gracious, Lauren.
Mortality and other things too is due to the research done by Ansel Keys.
Go and get yourselves a cup of tea, everybody. Come back in another 10 minutes when he's finished his answer to this one. Well, Dr. Berry, who actually does know what he's talking about, sits there in silence. Good.
You credit a lot of that.
And many, many, many others. But his creativity and his persistence, his ability to do this study, at times, there was...
Oh, you're a complete buffoon, Joel Kahn. You really are an absolute arsewipe.
So difficult. But, Dr. Berry and I may not do the same thing. I quote science.
No, you fucking don't, Joel Kahn. Not remotely. You wouldn't know science if it bit you on the asshole.
British Medical Journal, January 11th, 1997, published, is a Dietary Lipid and Blood Cholesterol by Dr. R. Clark.
So?
All you got to do is read that 395 metabolic ward studies. The best way you...
Over what period of time, under what level of control, that established what, Joel Kahn? You want to cite a paper without telling us anything about anything in it. That's ridiculous. That's not science. That's obfuscation. That's propaganda. And that's theology. Come and debate science with me, sunshine.
You can analyze 4 or 8 weeks, and all you see is higher saturated fat diets, higher blood cholesterol. Now,
so what? So fucking what?
The next step is to say, I don't believe that blood cholesterol has anything to do with cardiovascular disease.
Well, it isn't.
But that puts you out on such a fringe.
No, it doesn't, Joel Kahn. Not at all. That's your opinion, and it's false. It's not supportable with science at all.
Of academic cardiology and academic medicine. And
well, so what? I've been in academia, Joel, for 2 decades, and I know exactly how poor academia is. Ergo. You, on the other hand, are a medico who's got his name on some academic papers somehow. You're not a scientist asshole. You are not qualified to talk about what happens in science.
Reminding people that statins cost about $4 a month.
So what? They're also a dangerous contraindicated metabolic poison that should not be touched with a barge pole by any human ever.
There's no money in statins, so it's...
Oh, really? Oh, fuck. Oh, wow. There's no money in statins, apparently, everybody. All right. Righto, then.
It's not a money thing to say, let's...
Yes, it is.
Lower cholesterol.
Still.
Anymore.
Yes, it is, still.
I used to be, but it's...
It still is.
Not. So anyways, that would be one example. That has nothing to do with...
The individual price per prescription, the profit per prescription, has nothing to do with the overall profit, does it? This is basic economics. Huge volume of small sales adds up to a lot of money, doesn't it, Joel? You really are an absolute imbecile, aren't you?
Ansel Keys, the reference from Oxford University, January 11, 19...
There we go, citing things again without telling us anything about what's in it, or being able, actually, or competent to critically analyse it whatsoever. Good. 11 minutes and 40 seconds in, Dr. Berry still hasn't had an opportunity to say a single fucking word. Good.
97, the British Medical Journal. So, yeah, it's that science. It's his science.
It's not science, Joel. It's theology. And you're an idiot.
And really, it's, to my mind,
You don't have a mind, Joel Kahn. You have a theology. You are a mindless buffoon.
Major study since...
People often say to me, you're very disrespectful. Well, respect is earned, boys and girls, and this buffoon here does not deserve an ounce of respect. He's a theologue, a misanthropist, a criminally incompetent commentator on science, and a buffoon of the highest order. This is a boy that pushes a theology that kills people. Why the hell should we give this buffoon an ounce of respect?
In the last 4 weeks, there just hasn't been anything that's knocked that off its boat. Dr. Ron Krauss, somebody who's often correlated with paleo, keto.
Somebody stick a pin in this asshole. Let the air out of it. Let's hear from Dr. Berry, who knows what he's talking about, shall we?
Low-carb diets. He published in 2017 in a journal called PLOS ONE.
There we go again. You're still not going to tell us anything about anything, are you?
High saturated fat diets, high LDL particle numbers.
So what still?
Atherogenic.
No. Atherogenic is a theological term. There is no scientific evidence linking lipids or lipoproteins or any fraction of the lipoproteins or any specific lipoprotein with any disease whatsoever, cause and effect. None. Atherogenic. No.
Blood profiles, a randomized study. For Dr. Ronald Krauss to publish that, pretty impressive.
Lauren, you need to do a better job of moderating these discussions. You cannot let these buffoons waffle inanely for now over 12 minutes, citing 3 things without telling us anything about any of them, lying to people and giving his opinions. You have to stop him and let Dr. Berry correct his nonsense point by point. How is Dr. Berry expected to deal with a 12-minute speech? Let's see if Dr. Berry gets 12 minutes uninterrupted to speak, shall we?
Because he's associated with, the opposite diet, but in reality, his science spoke to it. So that's...
Science has not spoken to anything regarding heart health outcomes in human beings over any period of time whatsoever as that relates to any aspect of human nutrition. Still, Joel Kahn, you liar.
I probably went more than 5 minutes.
Yes, you did. 12 minutes and 34 seconds. That's a lot more than 5 minutes. And Lauren, you let him do it. Not good enough.
That's fine.
No, it isn't fine.
I think that's a great segue because, Dr. Berry, I know that you have some strong opinions about this. As to a lot of people, there's a lot of just absolute disagreement with what Dr. Kahn just said.
Yes, I think I've made it quite clear.
And a lot of, I think, confusion too. The belief from people that who employ, beef, butter, bacon, eggs, let's say, that saturated fat isn't with a proper human diet isn't actually bad for you.
Well, there are 5 major meta-analyses available on this topic, Lauren, and all 5 agree that there is no meaningful association even between any health outcome and the intake of saturated fat as reported by those people in those meta-analytical studies. So, end of discussion. Shall we move on?
The way that research...
See, that's how quickly we can dismiss everything Joel Kahn's just said. Oof, 2 seconds flat. We don't need 12 and a half minutes. There it is. Let's see what Dr. Berry says.
Science has sort of condemned it. So can you help me understand from your perspective, specific to Ancel Keys first?
Now, Ken, make sure you talk for at least 15 minutes. Now?
Your perception of that research, and then from there, kind of what you've come to find with science as well with saturated fat.
Yeah. Thank you, Lauren. And we hold a lot of the same beliefs on many things, but just not on diet for human beings. First of all,
that's very conciliatory, Ken.
Several things to unpack. Ancel Keys was...
I know that's your style, and I know that you know that it's not mine. It's an act, by the way, if those of you that don't get it.
A great scientist. There's no doubt about that.
Wrong, Ken. Sorry, no. Ancel Keys was not a great scientist. Absolutely not. Sorry.
He was very diligent. I believe he was mostly earnest. Now, his connections with corporate money, I think they're pretty well documented. But I own many books written by Ancel Keys. So he basically did the groundbreaking research on starvation. And I've got all 3 volumes of his starvation studies on my bookshelf at home. And it's dense reading, but I think it's super important research. The 7 countries study, the 6 countries, 7 countries. He did collect data from 22 countries.
That's right. And he published 6 or 7 of them. Ergo, that's cherry picking, and it's academic misconduct of the highest order. And he should have spent the remainder of his natural life in prison for being directly responsible for the untimely death of millions and millions and probably billions of people, period.
And Dr. Kahn said, Mexico, they didn't keep death records, so therefore that knocks them out. You can't really use them. But that's not the only country that Dr. Keys chose to knock out in the final publication. And so you can make of that what you will. But I think he was earnest. I think that he was following a hypothesis that whether he didn't follow that way of eating.
Yeah, but he completely failed to follow the scientific method and discipline, Ken, didn't he? Because he cherry-picked his data still.
In his personal life, which he definitely did not. Several quotes of him talking about the joys of bacon for breakfast. He believed that this hypothesis was true. And instead of trying to disprove that hypothesis, which is actually what a good scientist does, he spent his entire career trying to prove it and pile on.
Ergo, not a competent scientist, which undermines your earlier statement that you thought he was a great scientist, Ken. I believe you're just being conciliatory. I'll forgive you for that, but let's be accurate here. A spade is a spade, and Ancel Keys was a criminal misanthropist. That's it. End of discussion on that.
And like many really, really preeminent good researchers, he was a bit on the abrasive side.
There you go. See?
And that's also well documented, as Dr. Kahn knows. And he was...
You want to hear some abrasive stuff? You come and front me, Joel Kahn. You'll get the exact level of respect that you deserve from me, which is none. You better come prepared.
Not above berating, belittling, and in some cases, destroying the careers of people who disagreed with him. And so you could see how if you're a very prominent scientist and you also have that kind of reputation, most people are probably going to just stay quiet when you're talking. And I think he enjoyed a lot of that. When it comes to the studies that Dr. Kahn just quoted, he used a word there that's very, very important. It's very key, correlation. Anybody who follows me and listens to what I have to say, they know that immediately means that was observational research of some kind. There's several different flavors of observational research, but that's what that was. They also know that you can never prove causation with observational research. You can only suggest a possible association. And then you can also comment on how strong that association seems to be.
So long as you report the association that was actually observed, Ken. But they don't do that, do they? They adjust the observation, i.e. they fabricate and lie about what was actually observed. Some great science, isn't it?
But you can never prove causation with that. Very early in my medical career, I engulfed all of the modern nutrition research, and I believed it to be the gospel. Then me, like many other people, we kept getting told, oh, eggs are bad. Oh, wait, eggs are good. Oh, this is bad. Oh, wait, this is good. And so at some point I was like, if this is the state of the art of science, and I understand, the different studies show different things, but it shouldn't be literal black and white like that. Studies are going to do this, but they're going to generally be pointing in the same direction, not, oh, bad, oh, no, good. And so that's when I thought, it probably matters what humans ate a long time ago. That probably matters a lot. And so I really started to read.
What Ken's referring to there without stating it explicitly is positive and negative selection pressures on our gene pool over millennia. What we ate, how we lived, does inform who we are today. It's called evolution, and it's a fact. Ben Bickman, who recently claimed it's just a theory. No, son, it's a fact. Evolution is the change in genes over time. How do I know that this is a fact and not a theory? Well, here we go. Well, Ben, are your genes exactly the same as both your mother and your father? No, your genes are a mixture of both of theirs. Ergo, it's a fact. Evolution is a fact. There we go. Done. All right? What's next?
Read in the archaeological literature, and then later the anthropological literature, and then later the paleoanthropological literature.
While we're at it, Ben, if you want to talk about people rolling around in their graves, okay, first, I think you should educate yourself on what it was that those people actually did do in their work, what they did and did not discover. Because at the moment, the Randall cycle is not something that you understand, okay? Shall we move on? Ben Bickman is a great scientist. Genuinely is one. Ben Bickman is correct on many things, but he is not infallible. Okay? Let's move on.
And that's when it became self-evident to me, as self-evident as it is to all paleoanthropological researchers, is that from the beginning of our species, about 300,000 years ago, we have eaten as much fatty meat as we could get our hands on that entire time.
Fact. There you go.
And so there's this principle in biology. I had my undergraduate in animal biology. So there's this principle called adaptation. And so what that word means in biology is when a species has been doing something for a long damn time, so millions and millions of years, that species has adapted to that. And not only can they tolerate it, they've learned to actually optimize on that. And so when you look at humans, even before we were Homo sapiens sapiens, going back 2 to 2.5 million years.
More like 4.5, but okay. What's 2 million years between friends, Ken? And Ken and I are friends. So anything I say that might seem abrasive against Ken here, not at all. Once again, it's an act. Okay, I'm just pointing to the facts, but I'm doing it in a way that hooks viewers, okay? Because when I make videos that are just factual, people don't watch them, so I have to be this abrasive character, okay? Get used to it.
We were eating as much fatty
or click away. I couldn't give a fuck, honestly.
Meat as we could get our hands on, as much seafood as we could get our hands on. Anything that ran, swam, flew, we were going to eat it. The case can absolutely be argued that many times we were probably starving to death and we would have eaten rocks if we could have digested them, yes.
Salt is rock. Look at sun, earth is flat.
Totally.
If you cook your meat, you're a fucking slave. Nothing to do with carnivore.
True. Humans are omnivores. There's no doubt about that.
No, they're not, Ken.
I am not a carnivore zealot. And
Neither am I, but humans are not omnivorous by nature and by biology and by selection pressure. It's just not true. Sorry.
Have been. I advocate a proper human diet, which can range from low carb to keto to ketovore, all the way down to carnivore in some people in some cases. So adaptation, let's take a cow, for example. Cows have been eating grass for millions of years. If Ansel Keys or if Dr. Kahn or some of their colleagues in the plant-based world, if they did an observational study on cattle and they said, we've noticed that when cows add some meat into their diet, that the odds ratio is a little bit better for them. Just on its face, to say that cows should eat meat.
Cows will eat meat if you offer it to them, by the way. Did you know that?
That's an extraordinary claim. You can't even come at me with observational research.
Well, you can, but it's not going to help because it will not inform on cause nor effect, nor likelihood, nor risk, because risk implies a mechanism, and a mechanism needs to be established with empirical, experimental science, of which you will find basically none as regards humans, because ethics committees don't like it. That's why this discussion continues. That's why we don't have the science, and what we have is this ridiculous postulist theology.
You can't come at me with epidemiology. That's not going to cut it, because what you're making is a fantastic claim that cows should eat meat.
Cows will eat meat, as I said.
That's foolishness on its face. And if you're going to argue that position, then you need to have compelling, controlled research that shows beyond a shadow of a doubt that that's true. I don't believe that the plant-based community has that kind of compelling research.
They don't. Fact.
But I do know that through stable isotope analysis, we can tell what our ancestors have been eating for 2.5 million years.
Right. Fact, slam dunk, period, end of discussion. Positive and negative selection pressures are a thing. Evolution of our genes over time under those pressures is a fact. Done. By the way, none of that precludes the existence of God. This may be God's ineffable plan. Probably is.
And it's been lots of meat. We've always
Notice that it's not meat that's been produced in a lab, which isn't meat.
eaten lots of meat, and we can tell that very clearly. And so if you ask any paleoanthropologist, they're like, well, yeah, we're basically effectively super carnivore. 70% of our food comes from animals, and it has for 2.5 million years. So to say that
4.5, but hey.
that we should not eat what we've eaten for 2.5 million years is an extraordinary claim that Dr. Kahn is making.
That's right. It's ridiculous, fundamentally theological in its formulation, and not supported by science of any kind. And Joel Kahn is a criminal and incompetent misanthropist because of it. Joel Kahn, who, by the way, can't step out of the shower box and put his foot down on his bathroom floor without suffering a foot fracture, which he'll then claim happened in a much more egregious and mechanically dangerous situation than what he actually did do, which was break his foot by stepping out of the shower.
I invite him to give me research compelling enough to convince me that cows should eat meat or that Homo sapiens sapien should not eat meat.
There you go. 6 minutes. Okay, you should have spoken for at least 20, Ken, to make the point. Make that buffoon sit there in silence and listen.
And so I think that on a proper human diet, every single human on planet Earth is going to be healthier by including meat in their diet. I think I'm not making an extraordinary claim. I'm just saying we should keep doing what we've done for 2.5 million years.
Okay, and really quick, Dr. Kahn, I just want to say
So there, really quick is the key word. Let's see if you can manage it.
something really quick just to get clarity on this. So just yes, no answers, if you guys could quickly. Dr. Kahn, you've been vegan for many years now. Do you eat vegan to be healthier or because it's a lifestyle choice for you to help animals be happier? Sorry, that's not a yes, no. Do you eat it to be healthier or not necessarily?
For fundamental reasons. I do it for religious reasons because I honor something called
Right, so theology.
kosher dietary laws.
Right, so theology. In this case, Jewish theology. Okay, fine.
It's very easy to do that. I do it because of I would say 500 to 1 medical science.
There is no medical science that can support your theology regarding the eating of plants and the avoidance of meat or animal fat, Joel Kahn, still. You liar.
Because there's almost no medical science. There's lots of Twitter, lots of YouTube, lots of Instagram. There's almost no medical science for the carnivore diet and carnivore.
Or any other form of diet at all, Joel. Give us the whole picture. You liar.
vascular disease, carnivore diet, and reduction in cancer. It doesn't exist.
That's right. And it doesn't exist for your theology either, because all you've got is epididdly-doodly, middly-moodlyology. There is no science still, and Ken has already made that clear.
Look for it every day. It doesn't exist. 500 times more papers.
Yeah, but a pile of shit, Joel Kahn, that's 500 times bigger than any other pile of shit doesn't make that better. It just makes it a bigger pile of shit.
Just this week, I can quote you 3.
Oh, fuck, here we go again. See, this is supposed to be a yes or no answer. You were invited to say whether you're doing this for health or for theological reasons, and you've said it's theological. Now, you're trying to claim that you've got some science behind you, which you still fucking don't.
4 of them relate a whole food plant-based diet to reduce cancer risk, diabetes risk.
No. Risk is a cause and effect statement. It demands there be a mechanism. There isn't one established. Ergo, you are lying. You are talking about association again, which we have already made very clear cannot establish cause and effect. And Lauren, you need to stop him right now and say, no, Joel Kahn. You were asked a question. You've answered it. You've had your opportunity to answer that question. Now shut the fuck up.
Dementia risk and cardiovascular. So I do it for health. I do it for animals.
Well, it's not going to cause health. We know that for a fact.
That wasn't the initial incentive. And I do it a lot for the planet because...
Oh, rubbish. There's no science behind that either.
If 10 billion people eat like Dr. Berry...
Rubbish before you even say it. Absolute fucking errant nonsense.
We're going to be living in an earth full of shit.
Rubbish. Of a vegan and a carnivore, which one produces more shit, you mindless cunt?
And if 10 billion people eat like I eat or some modification,
then we really will be in a pile of shit.
We might make it through the growth of the planet in
fucking rubbish.
2050 to 2100. And just got to look at a body of research.
What body of research, Joel Kahn? Waving your hand and saying a body of research doesn't mean there is one. There fucking isn't.
I don't want opinion. Let's talk research.
Oh, you don't want opinion. Okay, well, that's all we've got from you so far, sunshine. I too want to see some research. Have you provided any that proves anything? In 23 minutes and 2 seconds? No, you haven't.
Just go look at Eat Lancet, a major effort to look at
Eat Lancet is an opinion piece, you buffoon.
Diet for the planet.
Rubbish.
That just was published by the Harvard School of Public Health happens also.
Oh, well, very fucking credible. Very credible, you buffoon.
Reduce cardiovascular risk. So I do it for 4.
Risk? No, still.
4 major pillars. 47 years later.
Rubbish.
Because that's how long I haven't eaten one speck of an animal product in 47 years.
Don't believe it, not for a second. But I don't care either.
So either I'm a freak.
No, you're just an absolute, arrogant imbecile, a buffoon, and Dunning-Kruger on feet. You're a theologue, a propagandist, and a criminally misanthropic cunt.
Or it works pretty well to eat fruits and vegetables, legumes, whole grains, natural soy products.
Rubbish. All of those things are vastly toxic to human beings demonstrably and clearly.
Like organic. There's a lot Dr. Berry and I agree on. I mean, I've gone through his proper human diet and, the 11 concepts. So nobody wants crap. Nobody wants excess, refined foods, refined sugars. I like fasting. I favor the 5-day fasting mimicking diet. I like minerals. I think people get sugar addicted. I have many patients that are. But the last thing I'll say, this idea that we actually have one ancestral diet is very much up for play.
It isn't. It's a fact. It's been established by stable isotope testing of human remains of all ages older than about 11,000 years, i.e. before the Agrarian Revolution, collected anywhere on the planet, Joel Kahn. Now you're just denying the science. You're a science denier, which we knew already by the fact that you've clearly made it patent that you're a theologue.
There was a really important study just published a few weeks ago.
Here we go again.
Stop
him, Lauren. Stop him right now.
Pause on that one for me, Dr. Kahn. We'll
Good girl.
Come back to that because I want to keep the
woman. I am sorry.
Really quick. We'll come back to that. It's a good point. Okay. Dr. Berry, I want to ask you, why do you eat carnivore? And have you ever eaten plant-based before or, omnivorous like you were mentioning before?
Yeah, I've been eating low carb for about 11 or 12 years, and then for about 7 or 8 years keto, which is much lower in carbohydrates, and then for the last 5 or so years I've been 99% carnivore. And like I said earlier, I'm not a zealot. If there's some nice roasted Brussels sprouts, I'm going to eat one because they're tasty.
Yes.
But the reason I do this is because for my health. And that's what I thought we were going to talk about was health.
Yeah, good. Love it, Ken.
Nutrition today. So I used to be pre-diabetic and I used to be severely obese. I weighed 297 pounds. I had the worst reflux heartburn you can imagine. I had toenail fungus. I had dandruff. I was a mess. I was working full-time as an ER doc and full-time in my clinic. And obviously sleep played a part in my metabolic illness, but I was just eating crap. And as soon as I lowered the carbohydrates, cut out the added sugar, excess sugar, cut out the grains, immediately my health started to turn around. Let me be very clear that I am not anti-vegan or anti-plant-based. If somebody wants to eat a vegan diet or plant...
I'm not against people doing that either, Ken. What I am against is people coming online and telling others that that's a good idea and will support their health, because it fucking won't. Fact. It's criminally misanthropic. It's evil, and it's unforgivable.
Should I say plant-based, or should I say is vegan okay? Or because there's so much vitriol.
Generally, doctors use the word whole food plant-based.
Okay, let's use that.
Well, that's an oxymoron, because plants are not food for human beings.
Not talking, fake meat burgers.
Gotcha. Perfect. So if somebody chooses to eat whole food plant-based for ethical reasons, I support them 100%.
Sure, but they need to expect fully that their health will catastrophically fail them at some point, probably more sooner than later. And people like Joel Kahn telling them that that's not so needs to stop, because it is so.
If they are aware, they're going to have to take anywhere from 8 to 12 supplements every day for the rest of their life. If they want to do it for religious reasons, I wholeheartedly support their decision. But if they're doing it because they've been misled into believing that has been proven to be the healthiest diet for human beings, I have a problem with that. And
so do I. The difference, of course, is that I'm prepared to say it in a much more abrasive fashion, precisely in order to be a shock jock and to garner a cult audience for clicks. Okay? I'm not really like this off camera. Still.
That's what I speak out against. I think Dr. Kahn will agree that I never bash vegans like some other people.
Me, Ken, I'm happy to bash them. Well, the ones that tell others that it's a good idea for them too to be vegan, because it still isn't.
In this sphere, and I never intend to do that, because vegans are just like carnivores.
Not really.
We're just trying to do the best we can and be as healthy as we can and try to make the best moral decisions that we can. We disagree on a few basic premises, but that doesn't mean that we have to hate each other or bash each other. No,
there's no personal hate involved. It's got nothing to do with it. This is about being clear about what is establishable, what is supportable, what is true demonstrably, and what is theology underpinned by nothing more than evil misanthropy.
I don't see a place for that at all, and that's why I was happy to do this evening with Dr. Kahn, because I think he's an honorable gentleman.
No, he's not. He's a criminally misanthropic and incompetent buffoon who ought to sit down and shut the fuck up permanently.
He's earnest.
No, he's not. He's a criminal. Basically, he's a used car salesman.
I think he's doing what he believes in, and he's promoting what he believes in, and I'm doing the same thing. And I think this kind of discussion, instead of...
Yeah, but one of you's right and one of you's wrong. There's no grey area here, Ken. You are right and he is wrong.
The bashing that we see on social media is going to go a long way towards helping just regular folks make up their mind.
Right. And I think it's exactly what the goal is here. We're all trying to help people, but let's work together.
I certainly am.
And let me ask you one follow-up question, both of you, and then I want to move to the next question.
And mollycoddling people is not helping them. Showing respect to people who deserve none at all is not helping people. Failing to call a spade is not helping people. We need to be prepared to get militant about this, because this really is a war and a battle for the hearts, minds, and souls of people who may end up, and do end up often, being misled by these criminally misanthropic buffoons.
That will kind of get to some of what we were just touching on there. Dr. Berry, yes or no, do you think high saturated fat, without processed sugar and all the crap, do you think high saturated fat is a bad thing for human beings to consume for their health?
No, not at all. Now, in the context of you're also eating a high carb diet in addition to the lots of saturated fat, that's probably an issue.
Yes, it definitely is. It's called the Randall cycle, and it absolutely is an issue. No two ways about it.
But saturated fat in the condition it comes to us from in nature, mixed with protein and fat from an animal, that there's no healthier food on planet Earth for human beings.
Correct. Fact.
And when you say a high carb diet, you mean plants, not processed foods. You mean if they combine that with plants that have carbs.
Well, enough plants for some people. And like I mentioned earlier, I went low carb. I lost a little weight, but I still classified as obese. Even eating, I was basically vegetarian, and I included very lean poultry, a few occasional lean beef, but I was effectively a vegetarian, and that did improve my health. No doubt about it. I lost weight.
In the short term, yeah, that'll happen because of the alleviation of the Randall cycle issues, yes.
My A1C came down.
However, it will not last. Your health will catastrophically fail on a diet which is inappropriate for a human being.
A smidge, but I only low carb keto, very meat heavy keto is what reversed all of my metabolic markers back to normal.
Got it. Okay. And Dr. Kahn, do you believe that a high saturated fat diet where you're not consuming any, processed foods, anything else, like I just said, is bad for one's health in the short term and the long term?
Careful, Joel, because there is no evidence to support the claim. If the second you say yes, you remove any thought that you might be credible, which should already be well gone. But nonetheless, people still listen to you for some reason. So be very careful here. Do not say yes.
When you deal with one patient, you have to look at pre and post and
So he's not going to answer the question because he knows the answer. The answer is no.
try and make this, there's a term personalized medicine.
There we go. So you were asked yes or no. Dr. Berry answered it correctly. He said no correctly. You're being invited to say yes, and you're not doing so because you know the answer is no. Ergo, you are a dishonest, misanthropic fucking liar.
The likelihood that...
No. Likelihood? No. No, that's akin to risk. It's a cause and effect statement. What's the mechanism, Joel Kahn? Shall we wait?
A total cholesterol...
No. You were asked about saturated fat. That's not cholesterol, Joel Kahn. Not at all.
LDL cholesterol.
And cholesterol does not cause heart disease. Not at all.
And very ominous inflammatory markers.
Yes, inflammation does cause heart disease, or it's one of the causal factors in heart disease, but that's got nothing to do with LDL cholesterol. And in fact, LDL is not cholesterol.
Are going to rise significantly.
So what?
Is the real deal with high saturated fat diet.
No, it's not, Joel Kahn.
I like to talk literature. I already talked.
No, you like to talk bullshit. You like to waffle inanely for minutes and minutes and minutes at a time without ever saying anything that's remotely scientific or supportable. You are a clown who needs to shut the fuck up permanently.
Talked about Dr. Clark's metabolic ward.
Remember you were asked a yes or no question? Remember that?
Studies, because metabolic ward studies are the cleanest studies that scientists have to...
They're still not good enough, though, are they? Even those.
Deal with, because we're locking people up and we're controlling everything.
No, you're not. No, that's a lie. Once again, yet more evidence that Joel Kahn has never actually been involved at the coalface of doing research. Ever.
And he published 395 of them in the set.
There we fucking go again. Same bullshit. Nothing to do with heart health outcomes in human beings over any period of time whatsoever. Just associations which have been lied about, fabricated.
Saturated fat in the diet and the blood cholesterol were related.
Yeah, so what?
And there's no doubt.
Oh, here we go. There's no doubt of what, Joel?
That many people suffer heart attacks, strokes, loss of legs, and death due to high LDL cholesterol.
Wrong. There is no evidence to support any of those claims whatever, extant anywhere in the literature, and there never will be. Once again, lie.
Now, the problem is there are some people that don't. It doesn't shake the entire lipid hypothesis.
Yes, it does.
There are other factors. The health.
You mean confounds, covariates, those kind of things, collinearities, things that absolutely remove entirely the capacity of any association whatsoever to establish cause and effect, ergo risk, hazard, likelihood, or anything else. Good.
So their endothelium, cofactors like their genetics and their homocysteine and their insulin resistance for sure. But
insulin resistance is a construct, Joel Kahn.
Yes, I do believe that.
Oh, there we go. You just said yes, ergo you are now a buffoon if you weren't already, which you were. Big mistake, because no, there's no evidence to support the claim whatsoever still.
I had a patient, and I don't like N1 studies.
Oh, shut the fuck up. Seriously, shut the fuck up.
Because I don't have any personal study. I've been healthy since age 18 when I started a whole food plant-based, and 47 years later, I'm still healthy. So I can't tell you about my...
So healthy, you can't put your foot on the bathroom floor out of the shower without causing a fracture. Yeah, that's real healthy, Joel. Good work.
My health. It's been incredibly good, and I attribute a lot of that, not to genetics, because genetically I have disease in my family. But I saw a patient just Thursday, 2 days ago.
Oh, Jesus H. Christ on the cross. Seriously, son? Lauren, you need to get this under control. This is ridiculous.
And he came in sheepishly because I had already sent him his labs. His total cholesterol was about 380.
So fucking what?
And previously it was 250. And
so fucking what? It's under the control of his genes, and it's appropriate for what's required by his physiology at that time.
I said, what happened? He was on no medication, and he's had a calcium score 0.
There you go. No problem then.
And he's had carotid studies, so I monitor him very carefully. I don't put everybody on statins.
You shouldn't put anybody on statins, ever.
For a number of...
They are a dangerous contraindicated metabolic poison that should never, ever be prescribed to anybody under any circumstances.
I monitor the blood vessels. And he goes, my wife went on the carnivore diet at the advice of a very good nutritionist, and to be loving and supportive for 8 weeks, I went on a carnivore diet. And yes, my cholesterol went from 250 to 400.
Which is exactly what we would expect. And it's not a problem of any kind.
And, maybe he's about 56. Maybe he'll be an 80-year-old man with a cholesterol 400, but he chose to give up on that. That's what you see commonly with a high saturated fat diet. And he had...
We see what? People's cholesterol goes up? Well, so fucking what? It's supposed to.
A clean, high saturated fat diet. The bottom line is, if anybody listening to this is doing a carnivore, a ketovore, a paleo, high meat and saturated fat diet, just do your blood work in a minute.
Yeah, and so what? Your blood work will not tell you anything useful about your prospects in any way.
Minimum. Do it before, do it after. Make sure you know the consequences.
Right. Well, the consequences are many, including vastly improved health in every respect possibly conceivable, and an increase in your blood LDL, which is what we would expect and what is indicated, and indeed not a problem of any kind still.
I'm totally familiar with Dave Feldman and lean mass.
Yes, and Dave is a software engineer, so let's not put Dave Feldman forward as a authority in the field of lipids, perhaps.
Hyperresponder, research, which I would say is...
Well, that's rubbish. The whole lean mass hyperresponder thing is yet another construct, and it's not useful. These people are not special. Nobody need be concerned about their cholesterol. It's under the control of your genes still.
It's infinite.
And it is what it should be still.
See. But, you're also talking about 70 years of overwhelming data.
No, there's no such thing as overwhelming data. There's only data, and the data does not establish the posit that you believe, Joel Kahn. Never has, never will. One of us is a competent statistician, Joel Kahn. It's not you, by the way.
That many people will have a stroke, a heart attack, or die.
Yes, and many people with normal or low cholesterol will too. In fact, if you look at the largest associative data set available anywhere in the world, 168 countries and territories around the world, some number of billions of person years of follow-up, you will find that there is a precipitous increase in all-cause mortality and mortality from every major sub-cause with the lowering of LDL cholesterol. Joel Kahn. Okay? Buffoon.
Predominantly due to high saturated fat in the diet. And
rubbish. You just said due to, cause and effect. There is no evidence to support your claim, and the associative data doesn't even support it. Theological lie.
Its impact on LDL cholesterol.
No impact is a cause and effect statement. No.
Okay. So clearly very different opinions on that one.
This, Lauren, is why you need to get someone who is appropriately assertive. While Ken Berry absolutely knows his stuff, how do I know? Because when Ken isn't sure about something, guess who he asks? Okay? Guess. Get that person to come and deal with this absolute cunt. Tell you what, it'll get views, I promise you. Get Joel Kahn on to face me, because he won't do it of his own accord.
I think what's interesting about this is that so many people in the carnivore space actually don't look at high cholesterol really as the marker of bad health.
Because it isn't. Fact.
They actually see it as the science is wrong.
It is. Well, there is no science, Lauren, none at all, that can support a claim that elevated, so-called cholesterol is contraindicated or a problem in any way, shape or form. Zero science supports that claim. It's all theological.
It's kind of like blaming the fireman for the fire.
Yes, good.
Where, obviously people in a whole foods plant-based lifestyle do not see it that way. So it's interesting.
Because they are ignorant theologues.
Because what we're
a spade is a spade.
Talking about is like science, right? How do we understand this? We do it through data, right? Data is collected. Well, some of the problem that I think we run into for both parties having accurate data is transparently there hasn't been a lot of research done on a carnivore lifestyle without processed foods, right? Or just not processed meats. And so I think a lot of people watching this will want me to say that and acknowledge that, because that is the reality. It's not been funded. And why hasn't it been funded? Well, a lot of people haven't been backing it with money. And a lot of people question that because they think that's on purpose, or that's, at least not an accident. So something that I wanted to ask to follow up on everything was, obviously there is a cost to everything. Everything has a cost, literally.
Literally.
What I kind of wanted to dive into, if both of you have an example, was a science-backed case or some data that you have from, let's say, a long-term carnivore that went plant-based, and what results they saw in terms of health. And then maybe the opposite, a long-term whole foods plant-based.
Okay, N=1 is not going to help anybody understand anything. This is a wild goose chase.
This person that went carnivore and the results that they're seeing. Now, again, you don't need to do this in just one little anecdote. Yes, that's good. And I would love to hear some of that. But big picture.
Well, big picture means you're not talking about people's anecdotes.
Really what's happening in numbers, right, that we're seeing. So why don't we start with you, Dr. Barry? What are you seeing? Are you seeing people going from whole foods plant-based to carnivore, and what results?
Yes, hundreds and thousands of them are doing that every single week, and it's vastly associated with huge improvements in every aspect of their affect.
Are you seeing? And tell us a bit about that, please.
I'm a primary care doctor. I'm a family physician. I look for signal, and I suspect Dr. Kahn looks for signal in his practice as well. If there's a new medication that comes out that says, oh, it's going to do X, Y, Z, and I'm like, okay, the drug rep's very personable. I'm going to prescribe that to a few people. And those people come back in a few months and they're like, oh my God, my X, Y, Z is so much better. That's good, strong signal. I'm like, okay. And no side effects. Everything's good. You see that? That's signal. That's what I mean when I say that word. Back when I was recommending to people who were severely obese, who had type 2 diabetes, hypertension, metabolic syndrome, fatty liver, when I was recommending what is effectively a plant-based diet, they are not whole food plant-based, not vegan, but predominantly plant, 70, 80, sometimes 90% vegetarian, very heavily plant-based, and say, okay, you need to eat less, move more, join the gym, join Weight Watchers, stop the bacon, stop the saturated fat, and that's going to help you lose weight. And they would come back in, they had not lost any weight. And I'm not talking about one patient, so this is not anecdotal. I'm talking about thousands of patients, because I practiced for 20 years full time. And so I would just not see the signal. And so I, for years, suspected these people of being fat and lazy and laying on the couch and eating Cheetos and not listening to me, until I developed prediabetes and severe obesity. And then when I tried to adopt what I had been recommending for them, because I was definitely eating junk at that time, I adopted that predominantly plant-based diet, only the leanest meats, poultry and fish. It didn't help me at all. And that was kind of my epiphany, like, maybe my people have been listening to me. Now, on the contrary, when I started recommending a meat-heavy ketogenic diet to people with type 2 diabetes and severe obesity and metabolic syndrome and hypertension, I saw in 3 months, 6 months, immediate signal. Oh my God, I've lost 40 pounds. Oh my gosh, my A1C is down by three full percentage points. Oh my gosh, I can get into the pants that I got married in. That's not just one case, one patient. That's hundreds and hundreds of patients.
And thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of supporters that Ken Berry has. They are all reporting about the same. Different time scales of their recovery, depending on where they're coming from. Sure, but the carnivore diet is appropriate for human beings. Fact.
That was how much stronger the signal was for a meat-heavy.
We don't need science for this. In fact, science is useless. It cannot inform here. The exact reasons I've made clear already.
Keto diet versus a predominantly plant-based, super low saturated fat diet. And so I'm just a dumb country boy. I just have to go by the signal. If I see signal coming back from my patients, then I go with that, because I would just ask Dr. Kahn, what's more dangerous that actually increases somebody's risk of having a heart attack? Is it being a type 2 diabetic, or is it having high LDL cholesterol?
Right. Well, that's a straightforward one. Let's see if Joel Kahn can correctly answer that immediately and quickly. Place your bets now. I would suspect that the odds of Joel Kahn answering that succinctly, correctly, and briefly are about 0.
Which one is more dangerous, and how much more dangerous is it? And I know Dr. Kahn knows the answer to this, but many doctors do not know the answer to this. They'd be like, oh, well, high LDL is much more dangerous than having type 2 diabetes.
So now you're also going to tell him what the answer is? Just ask the question, Ken, and give him the opportunity to hang himself.
Okay. So, and would you really quick, let me ask, follow up on that.
So no answer? Why didn't you insist Joel Kahn answer the question? Because it was a straightforward question. Which of those is likely to be more dangerous to a person? Which?
Foresee any long-term problems with being carnivore for a lifetime?
Well, that would require studies on human beings controlled and observed in a locked laboratory situation over a lifetime. These studies don't exist. That's why these discussions continue. Still.
I'm asking that because Dr. Kahn, you and I have talked about this. Sure, there might be benefits in the short term. Sure, there might be things that are working 5 years, 10 years. But what does a lifetime look like? And this goes back to the cost. What is the cost of being carnivore?
Sure.
Have you seen anything like that, Dr. Berry? And then I'm going to ask you the same thing, Dr. Kahn, but you first, Dr. Berry.
Yeah, so this is a great question, and this is a question everybody should ask, because everybody who's obese wants to lose weight. Everybody who's type 2 wants to reverse it. But what about 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years from now? And that's when I go back to the biological principle of adaptation, which applies without exception to every mammal that lives on planet Earth.
Every living thing of all kinds, in fact, adapt to their environment. Everything. That's what life is. It's adaptive.
Including Homo sapiens sapien. And that is, we've been eating meat for over 2 million years. And so if you're going to come at me with the extraordinary claim of, oh, well, it might reverse type 2 diabetes and obesity and fatty liver, short term, but long term, it's going to kill you. That's an extraordinary claim. And so I'm going to need some compelling, damning evidence of that, or I'm going to have to go with the adaptation principle that applies to every other single thing in animal biology.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. Kahn, let's talk about the same thing. So if you have any kind of numbers from people who have been carnivore and now have gone vegan, you were just sort of touching on that a little bit earlier, but do you have a lot of people that come in and, they're carnivore and now they go vegan? And
nope.
And let's say you do.
Doesn't happen pretty much. I wonder why not.
What results are you seeing from those people?
I don't attract a lot of carnivore patients.
I wonder why not. Nobody does, actually, Joel. I wonder why not. It's because we don't fucking need you.
Welcome them. I have a few, but they know pretty much up front that they're not going to get yelled at, but they're also not going to get supported as this is a breakthrough, and they're going to hear the full scientific spectrum.
Not from you, they're not, Joel Kahn. They're not going to hear a damn thing that's remotely scientific from you. You are a criminally misanthropic buffoon without the first fucking idea of what science even is.
Of dietary, nutritional
rubbish.
science, which is
Rubbish.
very robust and
No, it isn't. You lying motherfucker.
very favors whole food plant-based diets
Rubbish.
for body weight and blood sugar control and dementia
As compared to what, Joel Kahn?
reduction and
Not a carnivore diet. That's not what he's comparing. He's comparing the standard diet, which is vastly worse than either carnivore or vegan. You liar. You criminal. You cunt.
Mood reduction in terms of improvements, and certainly cardiovascular disease.
You vile, disgusting, disgraceful cunt.
Unlike Dr. Berry, I am a very busy cardiovascular specialist. My job is to prevent people having strokes, heart attacks, leg amputations. And, there's not even a debate that there's no carnivore data.
That's right. And there's no data supporting any form of nutrition as regards heart health outcomes still.
Reducing cardiovascular risk. And there are hundreds of...
No, there are not. Before you even say it, you lying cunt. There are not.
Well-done studies, not funded by, industry or whole food plant-based diets.
Rubbish.
That continue on and on.
Rubbish.
The latest one was Reversal of Early Cognitive Impairment, published by Dr. Dean Ornish
Another theologue without the ability to do good science.
weeks ago with whole food plant-based diets and
Rubbish.
lifestyle. And just another extension of this switchblade called the whole food plant-based diet.
It's not a switchblade unless what you mean by switchblade is something that will eviscerate you sooner or later.
What Dr. Berry and I both don't know, and this is the biggest problem with nutritional science, is
that it is absent. It does not exist still.
is he doing well on his meat diet? And I've done well for almost 5 decades on a zero meat diet because something about my genetics,
No.
my microbiome is different than his microbiome. We know
Sure.
that.
Right.
But that's because of the food we eat. But is there something about the genetics? I mean, I think the blood type diet is largely considered fraudulent in
That's because it is.
most academic medical centers. But there's something more profound about our genetics that allows him to flourish. And again, we have this common thread. We're not eating processed food, with rare exception. We're not abusing processed sugar and white flour. We're emphasizing whole foods. And, I know this doesn't directly answer the question you ask, and I'll get there.
That's because you don't directly answer any questions ever, because you are a theologue, a propagandist, and basically a criminal.
But the idea that there actually is an ancestral diet, and there's one, and it was very meat heavy, is very much in play. I mean, if you're an
No, it's a fact.
academic scientist and you publish in a journal called Nature,
Yeah.
you've done something very good, probably the number one most respected journal in the world. And
Sure, but that doesn't prove anything. That's just appeal to consensus and appeal to authority fallacy, Joel.
just April 2024, they looked at a paleo community in Morocco that has
What is that? Define paleo.
a cemetery 15,000 years old, and they identified based on isotopic analysis that it was a very heavy plant-based diet. It was not consistent with what Lauren Cordain talks about.
Right, so one small population, isolated, in one part of the world, ate a plant-based diet earlier than most people did around the world. So fucking what?
Others that were pioneers in the paleo and certainly keto diet. So,
By the way, that study, I think, from memory, was N equals 62 or less. Ridiculous.
the idea that we've been eating lots of meat for a long time
Is a fact.
is, I think, very much academically up in play.
Well, it isn't, Joel Kahn. It's a fact.
Just got to
Your opinion on that has no bearing on the fact that it is a fact.
read the most recent literature and not just go with hearsay. So,
Yeah.
but let
Go
me
ahead.
finish. Do I see patients?
No, don't let him finish, because he never fucking does.
I don't think it's the most instructive comment. What do I see myself or in my clinic? Do I see patients that went off on a keto path? I mentioned one. Have I had 20 of them, 30 of them? Yeah, and their cholesterol went crazy. And
So fucking what, still?
one of them had a presentation to the emergency room and got a stent to survive.
Yeah. And how many people present to the emergency room and have a cardiac event requiring stenting, according to the allopathic community at least, who did not have elevated cholesterol, Joel? How many?
That's described in the literature, people that adopted a low-carb, high-fat ketogenic diet and presented to emergency rooms and required stenting.
And some who didn't and who still required that.
It's still not a robust area of literature, but it's...
That's right. So shut the fuck up.
It's in the medical literature.
So fucking what?
Journals like Circulation. So
fucking what?
But, in the world of cardiovascular disease prevention and reversal, it's entirely from a guy named Lester Morrison in Los Angeles who published in the 1950s.
Oh, Jesus H. Christ. Are we fucking serious here? Really? Do you have any science to talk about whatsoever, Joel Kahn? No, still. Okay, good. Are you a theologue? Yes. You've admitted that. Are you a criminally misanthropic buffoon who is at the very least totally incompetent to assess science, and at the worst actually knows damn well that he is misrepresenting science to subserve his theology? I think it's that.
50s to Nathan Pritikin in the 70s and 80s, 150 peer-reviewed papers.
So fucking what?
To Dr. Dean Ornish's 90 peer-reviewed papers. And
so what? They're all rubbish.
Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn and Dr. Neil Barnard.
Ugh. Unturd. If we ever had any doubt that you're a joke, Joel Kahn, there it is right there, proved absolutely that you're an utter joke. Fuck me, are we serious? Neil Barnturd? Wow.
We own the science for heart.
Oh, fuck off. I'm the science. Trust me. Don't question the science.
Disease.
How dare you? I am the science. Wow.
Prevention.
Did Joel Kahn just say we own the science? I think he did. Wow. Oh, boy.
And reversal. And the obligation is for, I love that Sean Baker's trying to raise money to do a good study and that Dave Feldman is working with an academic cardiologist named Matthew Budoff at UCLA. But, until then, a physician and a patient, Joe, I want to help you, reduce your risk of a heart attack.
Well, first of all, you have to know what the risks of a heart attack are. And cholesterol, saturated fat, and meat consumption are not on that list. None of those things are risk factors for cardiovascular disease.
To recommend a meat-heavy diet is not consistent with good counsel to that person.
Rubbish. It is good counsel, demonstrably.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Barry, you were going to...
Yeah, I was... Dr. Kahn mentioned a paper recently published. I actually read that paper. It's the only paper in the anthropological literature that suggests that humans were eating a predominantly plant-based diet before 12,000 years ago.
Correct.
And the rest of the thousands of papers in the anthropological literature...
So it's cherry picking again. Taking the example of Ansel the Criminal Keys and cherry picking is what Joel Kahn did. Good.
Show very clearly that humans, from the time we evolved into...
By the way, if someone's scoring this discussion style debate that is, so far, the score is currently Ken Berry 1 million, Joel Kahn minus several billion. Sorry, just the facts.
Homo sapiens sapien, about 300,000 years ago, we ate fatty meat, fish, if poultry, that was the predominant food that we ate. All of those tools that you hear about, Stone Age tools, those were not tools. Without exception, they were weapons. They were used to hunt animals, kill them, and cut them up so we could eat them. That's what those were. Those weren't tools. Those were weapons. To say that, well, people around the world, and I actually agree with Dr. Kahn, I think genetics, and maybe gut microbiome matters a little, but I think genetics does matter. And that's why some people, when I say, hey, let's go low carb, lots of plants, lots of nuts, lots of berries, but you need some meat in there. They do great. It's typically people of Mediterranean descent, people of Asian descent. They do great on low carb, under 100 total grams of carbs a day. And it can be predominantly plant-based. But other people, and it seems to be the Nordic races, it seems to be...
So humans are able to adapt and survive to quite a varied situation. Okay, well, that's great. That's one of the reasons that humans have survived many of the events that might have wiped us out otherwise.
People of very northern ancestry, that's just not going to cut it. It's still too high in carbs. Their A1C is going to be high. Their inflammatory markers are going to be high. But when you get them on an even lower carb, more animal-based diet, that's when all of their metabolic markers go back to normal. People need to understand that if you go, they're really everything that we think of as our heritage and our culture with regards to food is a modern invention. All of it comes after the agricultural devolution. If you look at
devolution, well done, Ken.
The population of Homo sapiens before the agricultural devolution, we all ate lots of meat. There was no society that didn't eat lots of meat. And then, of course, we would eat fallback food. It's actually, they're called in the anthropological literature, fallback foods, poverty foods, starvation foods. Then we would start digging around for tubers. And definitely when the berries were ripe once a year, we ate the hell out of them, of course. But on a daily basis, in the middle of summer, in the middle of winter, we ate as much meat as we could get our hands on. This is inarguable. Based on the paleoanthropological and anthropological literature. Nobody debates that outside of just that one study. That I'm not going to try to poke holes in it. I'm actually proud that a fellow MD has read an anthropological paper, because that's a very rare occurrence. Most doctors don't ever read that.
Okay. Anything to say to that?
I will let you know, I wrote a very complimentary article, Everything I Love About Loren Cordain and his book, The Paleo Diet Edition 1. Because he pointed out, he actually was very strong about saturated fat being a risk, for example.
Well, it isn't. Still.
It's called, Is the Paleo Diet Healthy? 7 Things the Paleo Diet Gets Right. And it was based on Dr. Cordain's first book, the Paleo Diet. But he went and, altered his approach in his future editions of the book. But,
That's because it is a fallacy to state that saturated fat is a risk factor for any disease process of any kind.
Cutting out crap is where we absolutely stand united, and where the message, of course, probably most people listening to this are clean eaters, and they're not eating a lot of donuts and frappuccinos and tombstone pizzas. But
so that is going to bring me to my next question. I did want to ask a follow-up to what was just said, just to, again, yes or no, briefly. Dr. Kahn, do you believe that humans, evolutionarily, we ate meat, or do you believe that it was mostly plants? Yes to plants. How do I say this better? Do you believe people mostly ate plants evolutionarily?
I think plants were in plants.
Answer the fucking question, Kahn.
Plants were in the diet.
That's not what you were asked.
And grains.
That's not what you were asked.
Much more than is taught by many paleo, keto, carnivore.
Well, that just shows you don't understand the absolutely irrefutable evidence that you are wrong in that regard, and that your theology is complete fucking nonsense.
Researchers and physicians, not only the study that both Dr.
You slimy, appalling, repulsive
Barry and I read that comes out of Morocco. They just happen to have some very excellent preserved.
I read the acticide. The whole act aside, I really find this repulsive. There is nobody I dislike personally more than this individual, I think, because he is such a slime ball.
Cemetery findings to analyze. I know I was struck a few years ago by a researcher.
What happened to yes or no on plants? The answer is no, still.
Now at Harvard, Christina Warner. If anybody wants to watch a great YouTube.
Christina Warner is an absolute fucking imbecile, Joel Kahn, just as you are.
Debunking the paleo diet.
Rubbish. She did no such thing at all.
By Professor Warinner on YouTube. So there are other pockets there. I think it was a mixed diet, and it probably...
Well, you're wrong, because the evidence from stable isotope testing does not support your claim.
Varied by availability and season. It wasn't by restaurant menu, but that our ancestral diet demands meat.
Our current diet demands meat because we are still human beings.
Everybody agrees there were no, completely vegan communities in our background, but that's to deny that 2024 doesn't have special urgencies that 15,000 years ago had.
We're special, apparently.
We have pollution, and we have carbon emission, and we have
So what?
greenhouse gases.
No.
But I'm not an expert in climate science, and I don't think you are either, Dr. Kahn. So let's just stick to medicine and nutrition.
Very good.
And not muddy the waters.
Very good. Well said, Ken.
Don't you agree?
A dirty planet is a medical issue. Air pollution.
Yeah, but carbon dioxide isn't dirty. You imbecile.
Air pollution is a medical issue.
But carbon dioxide is not air pollution. You imbecile.
I totally agree. I'm opposed to both.
Partially, it's also microplastics and endocrine disruptors, which is...
Yeah, so let's conflate that with carbon dioxide, a perfectly natural gas.
That we don't have to talk about. But
well, I think what he's getting at, what Dr. Berry's getting at, is your points are valid.
No, they're not. Nothing Joel Kahn says is valid in any way, shape, or form, Lauren. Please don't be fooled by this slimy c***.
Extremely valid. And they're
extremely invalid. All of them
are very worth talking about.
No.
The conversation that I think is the most effective for the three of us to have is specifically about the health of people eating the foods. And now what you're saying is microplastics find their way in a lot of our foods, right?
Yes, whether those foods are animals or not.
And that's a lot of the problem. And that's why you adapt your diet today to adjust for that. Vegetables were good. Everything was fine. Substance-wise, it does sound like you're saying historically humans did include meat. That was part of their diet. And it does sound like what you're saying, Dr. Berry, is historically people did include vegetables. That was a part of their diet.
Not the vegetables that are currently available to us. They're all human inventions, Lauren. There were a few rooty tubers that were almost devoid of starch, mostly fiber that was consumed by ancient humans, not fruit and vegetables as we know them per se.
It does sound like the two of you, where the difference is how much of each. And that's kind of, it could be the genetics, right? That really could be something. With that said, I want to move into this third question here. So let me read this. It was recently discovered that there was a 20-person expert group, which you guys probably know of.
Oh, an expert? Good, expert. X is an unknown quantity and a spurt's a drip under pressure.
Called the Dietary Guidelines for Americans Council, DGAC.
Right, bought and paid for.
And apparently, and unfortunately, 95% of that council had at least one undisclosed tie to big food or big pharma.
Right, bought and paid for. Completely without credibility.
So for anybody trying to understand why that matters, the purpose of this organization is to basically look at food recommendations from a science background and provide official recommendations to the government for food guidelines for the next 5 years. Guidelines are given to the American public to say this is what makes you healthy.
Which is complete nonsense, isn't it?
Those 20 people in that group have undisclosed ties.
Yes, you've said that.
Almost 100%.
Yes, you've said that.
To big food, big pharma. I guess my question would be for you first, Dr. Kahn. Do you see these connections to big food or big pharma as a problem for people today? And why or why not? And if you think that affects the science at all?
Again, another commonality between Dr. Berry and I is we're both renegades. We're mavericks. He's not teaching standard family practice approach, and I'm not teaching standard cardiology approach. I'm a lifestyle-oriented nutrition, exercise, sleep, and stress management. Do I think that the pharma industry and the FDA and the DEA and the rest are completely corrupted by money and conflicts, and has it entered into food guidelines and recommendations? 100%. It's undisputable. The one thing we do know that's...
So is the lack of science supporting your position, Joel Kahn, but you don't seem to understand that.
Very embarrassing for the research in the Ancel Keys area was there's no doubt that a researcher named Dr. Hegestead at Harvard took the equivalent, I think, of in modern dollars of about $50,000 from the sugar industry to write an insanely complex article in the New England Journal of Medicine, which I've read, and I don't think I understood 30% of it.
I don't think you understand 100% of what you've read, Joel Kahn, because it's absolutely clear that it's not possible that you did, or you're a criminally misanthropic liar, and I think it's the latter, actually.
I don't think it made much difference in American culture, but that a prominent Harvard researcher accepted money from a lobby. Now, that wasn't Dr. Keys. They were colleagues, but they were at different institutions. I'm unaware of anybody ever proving that Dr. Ancel Keys ever took money from anybody to influence.
Was Dr. Keys aware of that?
No, this all came.
How do you know? How do you know, Joel Kahn, what Dr. Ansel Keys was or was not aware of?
Out maybe 7 years ago. So, and he had been dead probably 15 years. So I don't know if he was, but it's certainly no reason to believe he was.
Or that he wasn't either.
Yes. I mean, it's horrible. And, it goes way beyond nutrition. I mean, let's not bring up, the vaccine program in this country and other aspects, but,
You just did.
Follow the money is pretty much a good way to track down a lot of what the American public is told to do rather than follow your long-term optimal health. So, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. And I'm going to ask you the same question, Dr. Berry.
The Dietary Guidelines Committee is absolutely corrupt. I totally agree with Dr. Kahn. I think the is completely bought and paid for with the revolving door of a CEO being at this corporation. Now he's at the now he's at another. Of course, that's all egregious. Okay. But here's the thing so somehow Dr. Kahn, and with all due respect, because I love it.
Again, Ken, respect is earned. You don't give respect to people who do not deserve it. And Joel Kahn does not deserve anybody's respect. He's a criminally misanthropic liar, a theologue, a propagandist. He ought to be in prison for his misanthropic nonsense. Let's be clear.
This man, I love the way his brain works.
Far too conciliatory there, Ken, I think, personally. But hey, you do you.
I'm often tweet him, how do you separate? How do you know, Dr. Kahn? Because you referenced earlier, there's 500 to 1 studies, plant-based versus carnivore, which is true currently.
But none of those plant-based studies establish anything. Not one of them. Again, the analogy was a single piece of shit versus 500 pieces of shit in a pile, which is preferable. Depends.
And then there's all these thousands of studies about a plant-based diet. How are you able to separate and say, well, yes, the Dietary Guidelines Committee, they're corrupt. The FDA is corrupt. My Plate's corrupt. The food pyramid was corrupt. All that's corrupt. But these studies that show a possible association between a plant-based diet and health benefit, they're not corrupt at all. I don't know where the line is to say, oh, well, all these researchers are corrupt. But these researchers who happen to agree with
confirmation bias is what it is.
What I agree with, they're not corrupt. That was one of the main things that made me start to question the entirety of modern nutrition research, is because you can't get funding. If I was a young researcher at Harvard or at Tufts or at Princeton, Yale, UCLA, and I went to my program director and said, hey, I've been reading about this carnivore diet and I want to do a study. I want to do a randomized controlled trial. I'm going to do metabolic ward. I've raised the money. I got an angel donator, got $50 million. I want to put people on a carnivore diet. First of all, the ethics committee probably wouldn't approve it. But even if they would, the program director would kick that young researcher out of the office and say, if you want to ever rise in this institution, I don't want to hear any of that kind of foolishness again, because you cannot scale up and make billions of dollars of profit from an animal-based diet. It just doesn't scale. Whereas if you come up with a pea protein or a soybean protein, you can make frankenfood with that all day long and make $1 billion a year. And then you can fund all of this vegan research with your profits. And then researchers are like, I eat plant-based. You are obviously a plant-based company. You're giving me this research grant. I pretty much know what I need to find in this so that this study doesn't get file drawered, meaning it disappears and nobody ever sees it. If I want to do this research and then rise in the ranks of nutrition researchers, I better find a certain thing. I think that's ubiquitous in modern research. I'm sorry to say, I don't say that with any kind of pride. I say it with sadness, because it shouldn't be that way. But it's gotten to the point where you just can't trust modern nutrition research because of all the graft that Dr. Kahn said that he's very well aware of. I don't know where you draw the line between these are ethical nutrition studies and they're pristine and they haven't been touched by the influence of money or the promise of money. And how do you know which studies? Oh, these are definitely tainted by research dollars and therefore that came out in the results. I don't know where to draw that line. I think it's impossible to draw that line, and therefore I pay very little attention to modern nutrition research except for randomized controlled trials, which are very hard and very expensive, I'm well aware.
And you cannot extrapolate their findings beyond the tenure of that study, nor can you extrapolate extrapolate those findings to any population not representative of the population studied.
But otherwise, I'm not interested in epidemiological research because I know how easy it is for the researcher's preconceived notion to bleed into the results.
All they need to do is adjust the results according to multivariate regression in a manner that suits their funding source. Example, the Adventist Health Study number 2, where they studied people in terms of their reported meat intake versus their mortality over time, all-cause mortality and all the major sub-causes of mortality, and they found that the less meat people ate, the more they were represented in the death statistics of those people, and what they reported was the exact opposite. They said that the vegans had the least risk of death and the most meat eaters had the highest risk of death, despite the fact that their results clearly showed the exact opposite in terms of what was observed. There you go. There it is. There's an example. Go and look up the raw data from that study, and you will see that I speak the truth.
Sometimes unconsciously. Sometimes
no, it's absolutely conscious, Ken. They're doing it with malice aforethought, selectively, in order to subserve either their theology or their funding source or both.
It has nothing to do with money. It's just human nature.
What would you say to that, Dr. Kahn? Any thoughts on that?
We can't throw away 30 billion studies in the National Library of Medicine.
Why not? Because they're rubbish. They are not science. They are theology. They are propaganda. They are bought and paid for. They are a disgraceful shit stain on society. They should all be withdrawn, every one of them.
And we can't just practice intuitive. In fact, that's not how medicine's going.
Well, let's count the blessings of modern medicine, shall we, Joel Kahn, and how well it's serving the people it's supposed to serve, shall we? You absolute ridiculous buffoon. God, every time this boy opens his mouth, something even more fucking ridiculous comes out of it, doesn't it?
Medicine's going, where 30 million studies in the National Library of Medicine will be in an artificial intelligence apparatus, robot or laptop, and you're going to tell the robot your symptoms, and the research is going to dictate the workup and the treatment. And
well, that's completely inappropriate, given that there's no cause and effect data there.
That's welcome, because there's a lot of medical error. First thing
including everything you have to say on just about every topic, Joel Kahn, yes.
Do with every study is I go to the bottom and look at the funding, and you have to assume the funding's authentic or fabricated. But a study praising avocados funded by the Avocado Board may be a good study, but you pull back. This has been studied for egg consumption and cholesterol before.
Okay, well, let's look at a major study that claims that cholesterol is causal in heart disease, shall we, Joel? And look at the funding sources of that so-called study, which is actually an opinion piece, shall we? Good.
2010, most studies on eggs and cholesterol were not funded by industry, and there
gives a rip-roaring fuck about cholesterol other than people that do not know that cholesterol is not the cause of heart disease.
Was really ramping up by the Egg Board after 2010. Dr. Neil Barnard at Georgetown University published this in 2021.
Yeah, but anybody that lauds Neil Barnard as remotely credible on any source is himself an absolute imbecile. But we already knew that about you, Joel, anyway, so whatever.
And there were very big differences in the...
Because Neil Barnard doesn't have a bloody barrow to push, does he? Neil Barnard isn't a theologue, is he? Fucking idiot.
Relationship between egg consumption and blood cholesterol in studies funded by the Egg Board, not funded by the Egg Board, as one example. So, yes, there's real challenges, but, we have to go through and do our best. And if it's
there we go. We don't have good data, so we need to do our best. No, Joel, what you need to do is sit down and shut the fuck up.
Clearly compromised study by obvious funding conflicts.
You mean like the one we just looked at? Because that's pretty impressive, isn't it?
It probably goes down a few notches in terms of reliability, but I think you still have to read it.
Why?
So you think it goes down a few notches, or do you think it just becomes crap? Because I think that if you can see obvious ulterior motives, it doesn't hold any validity whatsoever as meaningful research. You don't believe that?
I don't think you can completely discount it.
You fucking buffoon. You're not doing yourself any favors today, are you, Joel?
No, unfortunately, it's the
or anybody else.
Same thing you said. Nutritional research is difficult.
It's garbage.
It's expensive.
It's garbage.
And sometimes the only way to get it done is, through industry-based funding.
Right, so it's garbage. Good.
And, in the pharmaceutical world, that's close to 100%. Nobody's funding pharmaceutical research, without pharmaceutical input. It's a big problem. We all know that.
Huge
and there's no open access to the raw data that people that are smarter than me can actually go through it.
That's almost everybody, Joel.
If it's true, that's a big problem too.
Huge problem. Yes, sir.
Yeah. And in the food industry, it's, less completely industry dominated, but
rubbish.
Again,
Joel, one of us has actually been involved in actually doing research. One of us, and it's not you.
It's true. The avocado world, the egg world, the olive oil.
Having your name on papers doesn't mean you actually were at the coalface doing the research, because you fucking weren't.
Studies, and sugar studies are usually industry funded, but I don't think we can throw them all out and totally
Well, then you're a fucking idiot, but we knew that anyway.
Disregard them.
Okay, so everybody agrees here that the food system, the way that we are given information regarding health is corrupt. And that's been the way for a long time. What you two are trying to do is help people solve their problems through real whole food, and not this frankenfood that we all talk about.
Plants are not food, Lauren.
Is it safe to say that we think the biggest enemy of all, whether it's meat or plants or whatever it is, the biggest enemy of all is ultra-processed foods? Is that safe to say?
I'd agree.
I totally agree. If the ultra-processed food is full of sugar and grains and vegetable seed oils, then I completely agree. I don't agree, however, that bacon is a high ultra-processed food. It's just sliced up meat. So don't be denigrating bacon, Dr. Kahn. Sliced up meat.
If we were talking about...
He's a Jew. What's he going to say about eating pork?
Cancer, we'd have that conversation. But yeah.
Hold on there, Kahn. There is no evidence to support carcinogenesis from bacon anywhere. That is another misrepresentation of science. That is another fucking outright bald-faced lie.
We're actually going right there.
Ultra-processed food is enemy number one. And again, maybe we need a part two. I mean, there clearly is a difference in the approach to whole grains. I would say the overwhelming majority of longevity science may be best pointed out by
There is no longevity science extant anywhere in the literature, Joel Kahn, you fucking liar.
Study by something called the Global Burden of Disease study. It's only like 196.
It's a prospective cohort study, ergo incapable of informing on cause and effect. Longevity is an effect. We cannot get at cause via this kind of study. Shut the fuck up, you lying c***.
Studies and tens of millions of people. Whole grains was one of the top 3 foods for longevity.
No, it isn't. The study cannot establish that connection.
I know Dr. Berry chooses to avoid them and run from them where...
No, not at all. Dr. Berry quite rightly dismisses them out of hand as being anti-scientific claptrap, theology and propaganda, and you're still a slimy c***.
The Mediterranean diet is a whole grain diet, for example.
No, it fucking isn't.
But anyways, other than that aside, it's hyper-processed foods, since the 1950s are killing us left and right.
Okay. This is my last question. Aware of everybody's time here. Do we have just 10 or so more minutes to dive into another question?
Sure.
Good, Dr. Berry?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Do you believe that red meat causes cancer?
Right. This will be fun.
Why or why not? I'm asking that because I grew up believing that eating meat was really bad and could potentially cause cancer, was going to make me as a female unhealthy. The language taught to me was salads. That was a big fear of mine for a long time until honestly pretty recently. So I'd like to hear probably from you first, Dr. Berry, about that now, yes or no, and then same to you, Dr. Kahn, please.
First, let's go back to the biological principle of adaptation. Human beings have been eating as much fatty red meat as they could get their hands on for at least 2 million years. So to now say magically, starting in about the 1970s, that, oh my God, red meat causes cancer, so much so that the World Health Organization
very credible, the WHO.
It is a possible carcinogen, isn't it?
See, were they possible?
Extraordinary claim. So you better have compelling evidence. And I actually have links to all of the major research that Dr. Kahn and others would use to say, oh, yes, this study suggests or shows an association between red meat and cancer. And if you actually look at those studies, the unprocessed red meat has a hazard ratio of 1.18.
Yeah, but that's completely inappropriate because hazard is akin to risk. It requires a mechanism. None has been established, ergo it's theology. Plus the data is adjusted, ergo fabricated. It's nonsense, it's rubbish, it can be dismissed completely out of hand. We can move on, we don't need to spend any time on this at all.
If anybody knows about statistics or...
I do, a lot about statistics, yes.
Epidemiology, that's background noise. A hazard ratio under 2 is irrelevant in the real world, especially with dirty studies.
More like 6 than 2.
That are using unreliable data like food frequency questionnaires. That's just bunk. That's worthless. Even for processed meat like bacon and salami and pastrami, the hazard ratio was 1.21. That's the best. That's what the World Organization listed meat as a possible carcinogen based on.
Yep, so just absolute, errant, erroneous, fallacious, theologically driven garbage.
There is no stronger evidence than that. You would think that they had some research like the epidemiologist who looked at cigarette smoking.
Right, 11,800% per pack year of smoking in terms of incidence of lung cancer. That's pretty compelling. Still not cause and effect, but I'm prepared to take that pretty seriously. 18% is not the same as 11,800%, is it? No.
But a hazard ratio of 1.18? Come on, that's foolishness. That's not even worth talking about. That shouldn't have even been published.
Correct. Especially considering it was fabricated in the first place. Remember? Adjusted.
Much less made a big to-do about.
No controls, aged people at the outset, non-representative populations. It's just absolute, utter garbage. And I wish we could stop wasting time on it.
In the whole food plant-based community and then ultimately by the World Organization, there's no research on planet Earth, and I think Dr. Kahn will agree with this, there's no research on planet Earth that proves that red meat causes cancer or increases your risk of cancer. That research does not exist. All we have is epidemiological research that shows a possible weak association between red meat consumption and increased risk of cancer. But when you look at the food frequency questionnaires that they use, they would call things like pizza processed meat because it had some pepperoni on it. They would call something like a hamburger, including the bun and everything else on it, they would call that a serving of red meat. That's obviously any just common sense person would go, that's not just meat. That's a lot of grains. That's a lot of vegetable seed oils, probably some added sugar. How can you blame that on the meat? That's just ridiculous. And so anybody who really looks into the red meat causes cancer myth, they're going to be completely underwhelmed by the research that whole food plant-based people would use to try to scare people with. It's just foolishness.
And you include bacon in on that too.
Absolutely. I had 2 servings of bacon today for my breakfast at 2 p.m. because I fast as well.
Got you. Okay. Dr. Kahn, what are your thoughts?
I disagree. I don't
On what basis?
think, again, Dr. Berry's quicker than I am
That's right. So is the average fucking slug.
to throw out. Again, none of us, Dr. Berry and I, weren't born with a Bible from Mount Sinai that described nutritional science and its outcomes.
True.
It's
Right.
difficult and it's challenging. My favorite nutritional researcher, based on his academic status, is Dr. Wol Tholomew at University of Southern California, probably the premier researcher on fasting and autophagy.
So an opinion.
And he talks about 5 pillars of nutrition. And
So an opinion.
really quickly, what's the data for red meat and cancer?
None.
Is there a reason to believe biochemically?
No.
We can talk, grilling meats and
That's not what the question was. And there's still no evidence, even with grilled meat, for cancer whatsoever. None.
we can talk about TMAO production.
Yes, we could talk about TMA production. I did that very recently. In fact, yesterday, my time. Perhaps people want to have a look at that. It's in a video called "Will Red Meat Kill You?" ? Or "Red Meat Will Kill You?" ? One of those two. Basically, the TMAO idea is absolute ridiculous nonsense. It is not a problem. It is not an effect in carnivore eating individuals who've been doing that for any period of time. Their levels of TMAO actually are lower than people who eat a plant-based diet, it turns out, Joel. And your absolute failure to understand this is just another pointer to your theological nonsense, your obfuscation of the truth, and your slimy, dishonest nature, basically.
Production. We can talk about 5 new GC.
Same deal. If there was a problem with 5 new GC, then we would see a meaningful change in outcomes between populations of people who do or do not eat red meat, which we don't see. Ergo, it's clearly not an issue. What's next?
Production. We talk about inflammation. Is there a
Inflammation? Based on what? According to whom?
biochemical pathway? Are there
Because the carnivore diet is one of the most anti-inflammatory diets that are available to people because it's species appropriate and species specific.
in my studies? Are there epidemiologic studies?
Epidemiological studies are nonsense. We've covered that, I think, in perfectly enough detail in this discussion for people to be able to dismiss that as well. What's next?
Are there longevity studies?
No, there aren't. There are no longevity studies. These are associative. They do not get at cause and effect. There are far too many degrees of freedom uncontrolled on a person's longevity to do such studies. Get fucked, you mindless cunt.
Do people in pockets of longevity eat lots and lots of red meat?
Yes, they do. In Hong Kong, absolutely. Yep.
Maybe they've eaten it for millions of years, but do they eat a lot? And then there's
Yes, in Hong Kong they do, and they have the longest lifespans in the world, Joel, remember?
environmental issues. When you apply
Environmental issues, we've already dealt with that, Joel, and absolutely you are out of your lane. No.
that and you apply the literature, I mean, just
Yes. Anyone that understands the literature understands that there is no literature that can inform on cancer and meat consumption in any way. Not at all.
anybody goes September 2023 to a journal called Curious,
Oh,
comprehensive
here we fucking go again, yeah?
review of red meat consumption and
A
the
review, you say, so that's an opinion piece, Joel, so get fucked.
risk of cancer.
Fuck right off.
It's
Risk, you say? No, risk is a cause and effect statement. There is no evidence available anywhere in the literature. See, this is what I mean about this cunt. Dr. Berry has just quite correctly stated that no evidence exists anywhere on the planet, and that's like water off a duck's back to this ass monkey. There still is no evidence, Joel. There is no way to get around this. Still.
not just the world. It's dozens and dozens and dozens of studies.
Which show absolutely nothing with respect to cause nor effect. Still.
Particularly colon, breast, and gastric cancer. And
No.
processed red meat, much more of a
We've also dealt with that. What is classified as processed red meat? You buffoon.
statistical issue than unprocessed red meat. And you're always going to find a contrary view, but I don't know that anybody's described that the World Organization had any skin in the game.
Oh, are you out of your fucking mind? Are you stoned right now?
Any funding by the broccoli industry.
I
They
agree.
just looked at the literature. So
Yeah.
it's
No, they don't look at literature. No, they don't. Neither do they make competent statements on any matter that I've ever seen.
imperfect science. You know, 1.21 hazard ratio is a 21% increase in risk of cancer.
No, it isn't. It's got nothing to do with risk at all. It's a made-up statistic. Let's talk about the incidence, and let's talk about the raw incidence. You fucking lying c***.
I agree. I think actually, Dr. Berry, I was listening to a YouTube by you today. If your lifetime risk of cancer goes from 5% to 6%, you might say, I'll take my risk and keep eating.
No study can inform on risk of cancer as that relates to any aspect of nutrition, whatever, still.
Meat. But as a physician counseling a patient, we still have to say, it is an increase.
No, you don't. What you need to do is competently remain silent on that topic because you don't know the answer. Nobody does, still.
And, it needs
a possible increase because it was based on epidemiological research, which doesn't prove anything.
There you go.
So you would have to say there's a possible 1% increase, right, doctor?
Yes, is the answer there, Joel. And I'm sorry, Dr. Berry, I was wrong to lie to people in a bald-faced way once again, is what you should say there, you lying motherfucker.
Or more, it depends which.
But you would have to say possible if you're going to be completely honest with your patient, right?
I would say the totality.
Yes, is the answer still.
Totality of the data. And
no, fuck off. Answer the question. The answer is yes.
What's called the 5 pillars of nutrition.
Fuck off. The answer is still yes.
Longevity suggests.
Insist on it, Ken. Make him say yes.
There's a foundation.
So yes is the answer. Good.
For believing and again, we're talking 2024, the fact that 90.
You're talking fucking nonsense, Joel Kahn, is what you're talking. Absolute obfuscation, waffle, nonsense, and garbage. You've been absolutely fucking slaughtered here by Ken Berry, who's done that way too politely for my liking, but hey, you do you, Ken, absolutely. This here is an absolute fucking criminal. No two ways about it.
85% of people eat factory farm meat and antibiotic resistance and
Oh, fuck off.
Contamination. And all of us, Dr. Berry.
Not a single scrap of science produced here by this clown in this entire discussion. Not one.
And I, and maybe you, Lauren, we're elite eaters. We spend more money. We buy high quality products. But that we're not speaking to the average American or average.
Sure. Yeah.
When we say that. So anyways.
So I'll just say I'm happy to be in the Semmelweis position, to be a maverick and a renegade, and to point out that Dr. Kahn himself has said that the majority of nutrition research is compromised in one manner or another. Which part do you believe and which part do you not? So that's why I have decided to go back to first principles, the very oldest principle known to human science, which is adaptation. Species should continue to eat a diet that they've eaten for millions of years. And until I see compelling nutrition research, compelling with a hazard ratio higher than 1.21, that's still suggestive, but it does not prove anything, then I'm not interested in not eating an ancestral diet because some plant-based researchers at Tufts or Harvard School of Public Health have a preconceived notion, and their preconceived notion slipped into the results of their study, and it got published and picked up, and because they're so prominent, the World Organization jumped on board. I'm not interested in any of that until you have compelling evidence. I think we all should just eat what makes us feel best and get on with our life. And what I'm proposing is not even a new idea. It's the oldest idea on planet Earth. Cows should eat grass. Fish should swim in water, should eat meat. Until you can prove otherwise with convincing research, I feel like that we can be friends, but we're probably going to disagree.
Can I ask Dr. Kahn, and I just genuinely want to know because I want to be able to decipher studies better myself.
Well, then the last person on this planet you should ask for assistance in that regard is Joel the Con Man Kahn.
How can you decipher the studies that are not compromised, like the dietary?
No studies are not compromised. None of them. That's how.
Guidelines for American Council. That group of 20 people that advises the government has almost 100% undisclosed ties to big food and big pharma. They give the recommendations to basically America. So we can pretty much know that it's not all completely transparent and there might be some interests in there that might change that. So I'm asking you, what process do you go through to decipher the good science from the bad so that I can learn.
Confirmation bias based on his theological beliefs and his desire to continue to be a propagandist and a criminal misanthropist. Simple.
Yeah, I think on an individual level, I mean, I know a lot of people on the dietary guidelines boards.
Well, there you go. What a fucking shock.
I've lectured with them, and some of them have corporate funding, but I
all of them
believe I know their character. I'm not.
No, you fucking don't. And, well, maybe you do, and you know full well the evils of these money-grubbing fuckers that put together these fallacious recommendations based on being paid a lot of money to do it. You really are an absolute cunt, Joel Kahn. You should be ashamed of yourself, and you will be paid commensurate to your lack of service to mankind in this life or at the end of it. You can wait for that. That is a fait accompli for you.
Defending the dietary guidelines. I don't teach the dietary guidelines,
right.
But it is too common in academic medicine to have, funding from conflicting sources. But yet, I think a lot of people are honest at their core. And
the people that sit on that board are not among them, and you know it.
I would bring up Dr. Walter Willett.
Oh, my God. Are you fucking serious? Wow.
Head of the School of Public Health at Harvard as well.
Epididly-doodly-moolymologist, and also a known card-carrying high priest of the Church of Anorexia Vegana, a propagandist, a theologue, and a professional fucking liar. Good.
One of those who's been attacked and maligned at times.
Rightly so.
I wish he
There is nothing further from science than nutritional epidemiology.
didn't take money from one of the seed oil companies.
There you go, he did, didn't he? We're done.
Blanking on the name, or at least the Harvard School of Public Health does. It does.
Right.
It does dirty the whole reputation.
That's right. Filthy.
Number two, I go back, and it's hard. But if you throw everything away,
which is what should occur,
then you have really no cookbook to work with a patient with.
You do, in fact, and Ken Berry has outlined it very clearly here and quite correctly. In fact.
I don't believe you throw everything away. I believe it.
Well, who gives a fuck what you believe? You are a fucking criminal.
Decades of...
absolute theologically based fucking garbage is what you have decades of.
You have 200, 300, 400...
Fuck off.
500 studies.
That are all fucking rubbish.
You find themes. You find
themes. They're all fucking rubbish.
Consistencies.
Yes, they're all consistently fucking rubbish.
And that's where I keep coming back to.
Yes, right. Because you don't actually have a fucking argument. Not a single fucking leg to stand on.
Whole food plant-based diet.
Is fucking garbage and not appropriate for a human being. Period.
Diabetic risk drops. Whole food.
Rubbish. That's a risk statement.
Plant-based diet, skin health. Whole food plant-based diet, cardiac health.
No, none of those things are true.
Plant-based diet, cancer risk.
No, none of those things are true. All lies. None of them based on any science at all. Still.
Whole food plant-based diet, optimal weight.
Rubbish.
There's a lot of junk vegans. We're not talking about that. We're talking...
Oh, right. So you're not talking about the people who are eating... All right. Okay. All right. So you're cherry-picking again.
About clean eating, just like Dr. Berry's teaching clean eating from a different source.
Right. Okay, so to wrap up the cancer piece.
The answer is there is no evidence whatsoever connecting meat with cancer in any way at all. Good.
Is, obviously, Dr. Berry, you don't think cancer is caused by meat.
It's because it's not.
Given your position. Dr. Kahn, you do. Is your consensus on that based on reviewing people who have just eaten meat carnivore for like a long time?
No, it isn't.
Or is your research from the studies that you've seen, or are you seeing a mixed bag of people who eat, some processed foods, some plants, some meat? My question to summarize is, where are you getting that consensus? Is it just the data or is it personal stuff too?
And you're addressing this to me?
Yes.
Okay. No, it's the data.
What data, Joel Kahn? There is no data that suggests in any way, shape or form that meat causes cancer in any way. Still,
data.
Saying anything other than that is a fucking lie.
Cardiologist. I don't run a gastroenterology practice,
right.
But the biggest message for people listening is the awful rise in colorectal cancer and other pancreatic cancers, breast cancer in younger and younger people.
Yeah, and what's the cause of that, Joel?
And I think it's the same problem that Dr. Berry and I agree on. It's hyper-processed food. It's crap. It's additives and excess sugar, but it's also, microplastics. It's endocrine disrupting chemical. It's the rise in obesity in the last 30, 40 years. So, yes, we should be incredibly focused on trying to prevent cancer in young people, for sure. It used to be a disease.
Old people are expendable, are they?
The 50s, 60s, and 70s. And colonoscopy 5 years earlier, and I think the guidelines will end up moving to age 40. So, and prostate cancer, oh my God, in the African-American community. Crap environment and crap food. So, but yeah.
There you go. You heard it here first.
It's the science. It's the hundreds of studies.
There are no studies which are remotely akin to science that support your ridiculous theological bullshit, Joel Kahn. Still, not one anywhere.
Gotcha. Okay. So in wrapping, is there anything that either one of you would like to end with as far as a question or a comment or anything that you just want to say to get out there as far as the science or an opinion or anything at all? This is what I'll say, is I wish that both parties would try the opposite way of eating for a while.
What the hell for?
Just to see what happens.
What the hell for?
Think that would be interesting. Now, obviously, Dr. Kahn, you do it for different reasons, just outside of health. So, of course,
that's right, theological.
We respect that. But hypothetically, it would be interesting to see how that would go. I will. I'll start with you, Dr. Barry. Any last comments that you'd like to mention or share? Or
yeah, I think everybody watching this can tell Dr. Kahn is honest and earnest, and
I completely and absolutely, fundamentally, utterly disagree with that, Ken Berry. He is a slimy, dishonest, criminally misanthropic, incompetent buffoon with an ego problem.
And he believes in what he's doing.
That doesn't make it okay.
And I think he has nothing but the best of intentions for his patients.
I disagree entirely.
That's how every doctor should be. But I think that he just said earlier that we really don't really know which nutrition studies have been compromised and which have not. And so I don't know how you could base a practice on hundreds and hundreds of studies, but you don't know the percentage of them that have been compromised. That to me,
that's 100%, Ken.
I understand his point. I mean, why would you not listen to the guys at Harvard and Tufts?
Because, well, there are obvious reasons why you wouldn't do that.
Of course, they're the smartest people in the world, right?
No, they're not.
Right? Well, I don't know
not at all
about that. I think sometimes renegades come from places you wouldn't expect with the right answer. And I think that may be what's going on here.
I get that you're being conciliatory, Ken. I get that. I get that you're smoothing over and brushing down the fur that you've ruffled up there on Kahn, but I don't see why you're doing that. He is a criminal, and he needs to stop.
I have great hope for Dr. Kahn. I think he's a very rational person.
Oh, my God, Ken. Seriously. Come on, mate.
And I think that if it were not for his religious prohibitions, he would wind up carnivore sometime within the next 3 to 5 years. But I understand he's made he has religious beliefs, and that's totally fine. But
that doesn't mean it's okay to espouse what he believes falsely in terms of human nutrition requirements and what is likely to be best conducive to a person's long-term health to the general public. That is not okay.
I have seen...
It is not okay to misrepresent the science, tell bald-faced lies to people about what the science can and cannot do, and completely ignore the fact that he's been absolutely fucking eviscerated by you today here, Ken.
Such an influx of people coming from a vegan diet into not just carnivore. Many of them do come to carnivore because many people go from one extreme to the other. But many people are like, look, this is not working for me. I'm having to take 14 supplements a day. I'm getting sicker. I'm weaker. I don't feel good. And then they add some meat back in, and it's like the light bulb goes off. They're like, oh, there you go. That's what I was missing. And it's not because they're gluttons. It's not because meat tastes so amazing. That's not what this is about. It's not because they're being selfish because they just missed the flavor of meat. It's because their health was suffering. And so I would like to ask Dr. Kahn if do you believe there's a subset of humans who genetically will only reach their optimal health if they do include meat in their diet?
That's all humans.
Do you think that's possible, that there's a subset of people?
That's all humans. It's not a subset.
Who just won't flourish unless they have at least some meat in their diet?
That's all humans still.
Is that possible?
I think that's possible.
Wow, a straight answer. Unbelievable. That only took nearly an hour and a half of their time.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Barry. Dr. Kahn, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
No, I enjoy the conversation. I respect Dr. Berry. Keep teaching clean diets.
You don't respect the truth, though, Joel Kahn. You don't respect the fact that you are not competent to assess science. You don't respect the absolute obvious that's been put in front of you today because you've ignored it completely every time. It's like water off a duck's back, as I've said. You are a slimy, dishonest, used car salesman and no better. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, and you will receive payment commensurate to the disservice that you are doing to mankind here at some point. That's just the facts. Sorry about that.
And we can share a salad together.
Absolutely not.
Yes. I'll
Absolutely not.
eat the avocado.
Right?
Me too.
No, I appreciate both of you. I think in the spirit of open conversation, having real conversation, not clickbait, there is absolutely no reason why people should throw so much hate towards vegans or plant-based diets. It's absolutely absurd.
Again, it's not against the diet or the people who undertake that diet. It's against people like Joel Kahn telling people that meat can possibly lead, cause and effect, to any deleterious health outcome of any kind. It is dishonest, and it needs to stop. There is no excuse for this behavior, none at all.
And I think, unless you're arguing for animal protection, which I do understand, there's no reason to shame people who are carnivore or meat-based. I think it's absurd. I think all parties should work together. The goal is the same. And I think everybody here can echo the same thing. Stop eating fake food. Pretty much everything that's packaged, for the most part, is not real food. And
meat comes in packages, usually.
That is making you sick and anxious and fat. And that's the problem. So without, I guess we don't have anything else. If anybody else would like to ask any questions for our next conversation, please drop a comment below. I'll make sure to get Dr. Berry and Dr. Kahn these questions. So maybe we do a follow-up. Please like, subscribe, share, and I will see you guys all on the next one.
Thank you.
All right, there you have it, boys and girls. That's my take on it. Whether you like my take on it or not is not my concern. I really have no concern whether you like what I said or how I said it. However, what I said is absolutely, utterly unchallengeable in fact. So if you want the facts, you need to understand that what has happened here in this discussion is that Joel the Con Man Kahn has been absolutely, utterly eviscerated pillar to post by Dr. Ken Berry, who did so in a very gentle and very gentlemanly fashion, for which we have to respect him absolutely, and I understand why he did so. I can't get alongside that, though. This is a slimy piece of shit. Joel Kahn, you are a fucking disgrace. Right. Join me next time when someone won't be quite as offensive as Joel Kahn. See you then. Ciao for now.